the Three Borders region. At the heart of it all lay Tessit, a town in eastern Mali, just 145 kilometers from Gao. This was Ground Zero, a place long haunted by armed terrorist groups, known locally as GAT. The mission's objective was clear: strike hard, dismantle their bases, break their grip on the land. According to local reports, the armies of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger moved as one. Backed by air power, they advanced into hostile territory. Villages like Inamasor, Haram, and Serekewile became battlegrounds as the alliance closed in. The results spoke for themselves. Terrorist hideouts dismantled, vehicles and motorcycles destroyed, weapons and equipment seized. For the first time in years, the tide seemed to turn. And yet, this was only the beginning. But this was never just about a military alliance. What happened here was bigger. The collaboration of these three nations was living proof of unity, an affirmation that together, their strength could no longer be ignored. The operation brought out the full weight of the AES military machine. On land and in the skies, their forces moved with precision. Base after base was neutralized. Weapons, vehicles, and equipment once used to terrorize civilians now lay in the hands of the alliance. Aerial support was the game changer. It gave the AES forces eyes in the sky, covering ground troops and striking deep into enemy territory. For once, the terrorists had nowhere to run, and the impact was immediate. Reports began to surface from villages and towns across the region. People were finally breathing again. Peace, fragile but real, had returned. The most striking moment came with the fall of a name long feared: Musa Hima Diallo, leader of the Ketiba Sirma faction, tied to the jihadist group JNIN. In the Douentza sector, Diallo was neutralized. With him, one of the deadliest threats to Mali and Burkina Faso had been silenced. The head of mission in Tessit praised the operation as a turning point. He emphasized that regional cooperation through the AES Joint Force wasn't just restoring security, it was reopening roads, reviving trade, and allowing ordinary people to live without constant fear. He called on local...
Hey, Konkonko TV so atiefo na hwefo e mamu nyina akwa aba ensema hudu be yensa aka na yaso so yaboa no se yede besom yetiefo ene yahwefo enti bra ogusu ti na ohwe ye no wo be subscribe wo be share wo be like na fi do comment so ato ase uwie a notification bell no ho na fi wa mia so na ne de beba bia no onsoso wonya bia hwe wonya bia ti be wo bia no wonsa ebeka ye bo wuransem foforo mu na ye wuransem foforo mu a ene ne ye bo awura mu e wo Burkina Faso emanmu yinye beka se be nsi minu na se mfie mensa atwam ko abantugu esore ewa bibimanmu mekire Africa ene ehun sensem bebire ne sisiye aman bibire tutu omo president etuguye military government ebe take over na aman bi etise Mali Niger and Afi Burkina Faso, Sama Miensan etutu eya bantugu etuguye, ama military government ebe take over. Na sa ama miensan we akomo ho aboma omo afom ekuo se omo de bebo omo man ho ban bebo timamufo ho ban na ne se na be ya basabasa ye bia na se rebels bi emfiri ba bi emeto nhye oman no so na so meto nhye kunu so emesai eniema ewo ho enti omo afom ekuo anu oden se we ho ka we beba beboa na fe omo timi aboban aboa ama fahudie ni mpuntuo ene enema papa atimi aba amasa aman emiensen enti ku a omo afome ne anu eden na ebebo omo hankasa omo ho ban aboa omo na obi amfiri baabi ameto anhye omo so abrekora omo ani na omo ho so enti ene training bi esese omo training omo abambofo mekire asrafo bia no enema bi ombe hia bia no akodie bi esese omo de ebebo ban ebeboa ama asra adwuma na timi apagya bia no ombe yese ne be ya terrorists bi emfiri baabi emeto nhye omo so emma de mo peso mo yebo omo man no mukuro nu ensai enti ye ho nsem bebre ho videos nso wo ha ya ye de beto aso no wanya bi ahwe wanya bi ati enti wo de egwom nya ne se wo be subscribe wo be share wo be like na fe so wa comment e de account na se e ba wonso wanya bi ahwe na wanya bi ati.
Alliance, 3 leaders of the Sahel region took a bold step. They launched a joint military operation, not for show, but to protect the very lifeline of their nations. This was no ordinary mission. It was historic, and it unfolded in one of the most dangerous places on the map, the Three Borders region. At the heart of it all lay Tessit, a town in eastern Mali, just 145 kilometers from Gao. This was Ground Zero, a place long haunted by armed terrorist groups, known locally as GAT. The mission's objective was clear: strike hard, dismantle their bases, break their grip on the land. According to local reports, the armies of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger moved as one. Backed by air power, they advanced into hostile territory. Villages like Inamasor, Haram, and Serekewile became battlegrounds as the alliance closed in. The results spoke for themselves. Terrorist hideouts dismantled, vehicles and motorcycles destroyed, weapons and equipment seized. For the first time in years, the tide seemed to turn. And yet, this was only the beginning. But this was never just about a military alliance. What happened here was bigger. The collaboration of these three nations was living proof of unity, an affirmation that together, their strength could no longer be ignored. The operation brought out the full weight of the AES military machine. On land and in the skies, their forces moved with precision. Base after base was neutralized. Weapons, vehicles, and equipment once used to terrorize civilians now lay in the hands of the alliance. Aerial support was the game changer. It gave the AES forces eyes in the sky, covering ground troops and striking deep into enemy territory. For once, the terrorists had nowhere to run, and the impact was immediate. Reports began to surface from villages and towns across the region. People were finally breathing again. Peace, fragile but real, had returned. The most striking moment came with the fall of a name long feared: Musa Hima Diallo, leader of the Ketiba Sirma faction, tied to the jihadist group JNIN. In the Douentza sector, Diallo was neutralized. With him, one of the deadliest threats to Mali and Burkina Faso had been silenced. The head of mission in Tessit praised the operation as a turning point. He emphasized that regional cooperation through the AES Joint Force wasn't just restoring security, it was reopening roads, reviving trade, and allowing ordinary people to live without constant fear. He called on local communities to continue working with the defense forces, warning that the fight was far from over. But for now, in Tessit and beyond, hope was beginning to replace terror. The collaboration between these three countries did more than just dismantle armed groups. It set a new standard, a blueprint for how regional cooperation in Africa could and should work. But here's what many don't know. This operation was not random. It was part of a carefully crafted joint security plan, activated months earlier by the AES. Back in November 2024, General Assimi Goïta, president of the Sahel States Confederation, issued direct orders to the chiefs of staff of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. His command was clear: bring the joint action plan to life. This decision was rooted in a historic moment. On July 6th in Niamey, the leaders of the three nations gathered to create the AES Confederation. Out of that summit came a vision, a defense and security roadmap designed to reclaim the Sahel. The plan itself was the work of military experts, guided by the top brass of each country. Brigadier General Celestine Simpore of Burkina Faso, Major General Omar Diarra of Mali, Brigadier General Moussa Salawa Barmou of Niger, three commanders shaping one strategy. On November 5th, 2024, the military leaders met in Bamako. Behind closed doors, they reviewed the conclusions of their experts. That very afternoon, inside the Kuluba Palace, they presented their findings to President Goïta himself. The purpose was simple, yet decisive: to secure his final guidance and his blessing to put the plan into motion. General Moussa Salawa Barmou, chief of the General Staff of the Nigerian Armed Forces, left no room for doubt. The plan, he explained, was built to confront every threat facing the Sahel: terrorism, transnational crime, and deliberate attempts at destabilization. Securing our territories, he said, is the only way our people can finally focus on what truly matters: development. His words carried urgency. These were not just abstract strategies. They were concrete steps designed for immediate action. Because, as the general warned, terrorists, traffickers, and armed groups do not wait. They strike without warning. That is why the plan demanded speed, large-scale operations, executed across borders to guarantee the safety of people and property within the AES zone. But the general's message was not only to his soldiers, it was to the citizens of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. He called on them to stand firm, to show resilience, and to place their trust in the AES defense forces. Because in this fight, unity between armies and their people could be the difference between survival and collapse. The operation in Tessit was only one piece of a much larger strategy. The leaders of the AES have raised alarms about new threats. Terrorist groups reorganizing in the Lake Chad Basin, across the Sahel, and in sensitive border regions like Niger and Nigeria, Niger and Benin, and between Niger and Burkina Faso. Their response was swift. Defense and security forces were placed on maximum alert, and the entire confederal space was declared a single battlefield. From now on, the Sahel would be treated as one theater of war, with national operations moving in parallel under a unified command. What followed marked a turning point in history. The AES began to achieve what ECOWAS, France, and even the United States could not accomplish in the region. According to a recent report, between 2023 and 2025, the alliance eliminated more than 4,200 terrorists, over 4,000 fighters in just 2 years, an achievement that stunned both allies and rivals. The announcement came directly from the AES press office. In its statement, the bloc revealed that Burkina Faso and Niger, operating under the ARE campaign, had carried out coordinated strikes with devastating effect. Their success, the AES explained, was built on 3 pillars: stronger regional cooperation, full independence from former Western partners, and a bold, homegrown security strategy. A strategy designed not in foreign capitals, but in the heart of the Sahel. For the first time in decades, the war against terror in West Africa was being waged, and won, by Africans themselves. The numbers themselves tell a powerful story. Over 1,000 terrorists were eliminated in Burkina Faso, between 1,500 and 2,000 in Mali, nearly 1,200 in Niger. Each figure represents a decisive blow, and each operation pushed the AES further ahead in a war once thought impossible to win. But perhaps the most striking line in the entire report was this: the AES is winning the war that others failed to wage. Those are not empty words. While insecurity is far from over, the progress is undeniable. In fact, it is more progress than these nations ever achieved when foreign forces, France in particular, were still operating on their soil. And yet, if you turn to the Western media, you'll rarely hear this side of the story. Instead, you'll find headlines of chaos, failure, and despair. For decades, Western outlets have fed the same narrative: Africa equals war, poverty, and death. The good is hidden. The victories are ignored. This is no accident. It falls perfectly in line with a long-standing agenda to spread the belief that Africa has nothing to offer the world except tragedy. But the AES is proving otherwise, and that truth is harder to silence with every passing day. So, rather than believe what Western media says, believe the voices of the Sahel. Ordinary citizens across the AES countries have confirmed again and again that since the military took power, life has improved. In simple terms, the AES is winning the war that outsiders, who once claimed to be saviors, completely failed to win. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The alliance is no longer limited to military operations. The AES has evolved, expanding its reach into economics and infrastructure. Recently, Burkina Faso and Mali launched a major project to rehabilitate cross-border roads, with support from the African Development Bank. A historic step, and one that ECOWAS had never even considered. On November 29, 2024, the African Development Bank approved a massive loan of 156.6 million euros for Burkina Faso and Mali. The goal? To develop an asphalt cross-border roads connecting both countries to Ivory Coast. According to the bank's report, over 242 kilometers of road will be rehabilitated in Burkina Faso and Mali. This financing comes from the bank's concessional window and its transition support facility, a program designed to give extra resources to fragile states facing conflict and instability. In other words, the AES isn't just defending its people with weapons. It's laying down roads, building connections, and creating the foundations of a stronger future. But the African Development Bank is not alone in this effort. According to reports, the Islamic Development Bank and even the European Union have stepped in as co-financiers, contributing 138 million euros and 25 million euros respectively. Together, these funds are transforming one of the most important cross-border road projects in the Sahel. For Burkina Faso, the project will bring sweeping changes. It includes the rehabilitation and reinforcement of the Bobo Dioulasso Banfora Ivory Coast border road, stretching 155 kilometers. Even more symbolic is the rehabilitation and expansion of the Laraba River Bridge, a 100-meter crossing that physically connects Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast. This bridge will no longer just carry vehicles. It will carry the weight of renewed cooperation and economic hope. Beyond the highways, the plan also targets local development. 18 kilometers of urban roads will be built in secondary cities, while another 50 kilometers of rural roads will open up isolated communities. These improvements won't just stimulate trade, they will help shield populations from the harsh effects of climate change, creating a more resilient local economy. For Mali, the African Development Bank's support is equally vital. A total of 73.73 million euros has been dedicated to the development and paving of the Buguni-Garello Road, part of the Buguni-Garallo-Manankoro Ivory Coast border section. This stretch is about 45 kilometers long, but its impact goes far beyond distance. The project is designed to unfold over 6 years, from 2024 to 2030, and will serve as a critical lifeline for the country. Here's why this matters. Both Mali and Burkina Faso are landlocked nations. They have no direct access to the sea. For international trade, they depend entirely on land corridors that connect them to the seaports of neighboring coastal countries. Without these routes, their economies remain trapped inland. For Burkina Faso and Mali, the closest gateway to the world is Ivory Coast. Corridors like Abidjan, Bobo, Dioulasso, Ouagadougou, and Bamako-San Pedro provide access to the ports of Abidjan and San Pedro. These routes are more than roads. They are arteries of survival, carrying trade, fuel, and opportunity. This is why the rehabilitation of the cross-border project is not just a matter of infrastructure, it is a matter of sovereignty. For Mali and Burkina Faso, rebuilding these roads is about unlocking the world beyond their borders and proving that landlocked does not mean locked out. With this project, Mali and Burkina Faso will finally strengthen their national and regional transport supply chains, creating new momentum for intra-regional trade. The upgrades will raise the service levels of key roads like the Bobo Dioulasso border connection. Equally important, the project will secure year-round access across the Laraba River, ensuring the crossing can withstand all climatic conditions. It will also boost the efficiency of trade corridors by cutting down on non-tariff barriers, simplifying administrative procedures, and reducing border crossing times. This isn't just about commerce. These improvements will open the door to better access to essential social and community services for people living along the routes. They mean life becoming just a little bit easier for millions across the Sahel. This program is not just about laying down roads. It has been designed with a multidimensional integrated approach, one centered on regional integration, value chains, and even peace itself. The goal is simple: to maximize the impact on economic competitiveness. For local communities, this means far more than asphalt. It means real socio-economic infrastructure, paired with facilities that can strengthen resilience in areas long scarred by conflict and instability. The program also supports the broader vision of community agreements, making transport cheaper and more accessible, boosting trade volumes along the corridors, and breathing new life into local and regional economies. And as these roads cut across towns and cities, they don't just connect borders. They create jobs, stimulate commerce, and transform entire regions. What begins as a road project becomes something much larger, an engine of economic transformation for the Sahel. The project also unlocks the immense economic potential of the region. The area directly affected is a vast agro-pastoral zone, where agriculture and livestock farming sustain more than 4.5 million people. nearly 6.3% of the combined population of the three AES countries. Here, large industrial plants coexist with small semi-industrial farms and food processing units. In a time of global warming and growing aridity across the Sahel, this region has become a refuge for farmers and herders searching for better ecological conditions. While